Hello, welcome back to my channel. This week I'm taking you along my trip through the Pacific Northwest and Canada. But before we get started, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up so that way we can keep on growing. Now, if you're wondering about what I packed on this trip, I actually uploaded a video on that and you can find it linked above and down below. But I'm actually at a campground that is part of one leg of our journey, and since getting here, I've eaten a lot of good food and I've gone on a lot of great hikes. So let's roll back time and let's show you my full trip. Let's go. So to start my journey, I flew from New York to Seattle, and before I knew it, we were off on our road trip. Our first stop was to get some dim sum in Vancouver. Now, Vancouver is known for their dim sum, and my friend who I was traveling with said that this was her go-to place. So I'm pretty new to the dim sum game, but everything we had was delicious. We started with some tea, and then we had some shrimp rice rolls, which were just chef's kiss. I'm a big rice roll fan, and these were silky and chewy, but still delicate. Also, my friend and I both noticed that these rice rolls had whole shrimp in them, which we feel like we don't see as much. A lot of times it's chopped up or sometimes even just shrimp paste. So I appreciated that, and I think it added to the overall experience. Then we ordered barbecue pork buns, which were pillowy and stuffed with a sweet pork filling. We had some shrimp dumplings after that, which had a generous filling inside and did not disappoint. The next item that we had was new to me, and I think it was one of my favorite menu items that we got. It was a pan-fried eggplant stuffed with shrimp, and wow, the textures and flavors are all melted together and it really just hit the spot. This was also new to me. It was a fried daikon cake. It was dense and satiating, and I would definitely order it again. And then we closed out the meal with some egg tarts before we headed back on the road. Okay, after driving east for a little while, we decided we should stop at Tim Hortons to see what the hoot was all about. If you don't know what Tim Hortons is, it's a quick stop coffee shop type of place. It's popular all over Canada. An American equivalent would be like a Dunkin' Donuts because of their donut and coffee and food offerings, and it was also a pretty similar vibe. I got an iced coffee, which they seem to be doing a collaboration with the famous Canadian Justin Bieber on, hence Biebs Brew written on my cup. I also ordered a maple donut and some of their Timbits, which are donut holes. This was my first time having a maple-filled donut, and I thought the icing on top was pretty good, but the filling was just cream, so it wasn't my favorite maple donut that I've had. Overall, it was fun to try Tim Hortons. It's a classic quick service place, but not somewhere I will go out of my way to go back to. It's similar to most fast food quick service places. It's quick, it's convenient, and it's pretty good in a pinch. Then we were back on the road, and our next stop ended up being the grocery store to get some items for the next few days. And fun fact about me, I love going to the grocery store in other countries just to see the difference in products and produce. And the first item that I grabbed were some ketchup chips. This is supposedly a popular snack in Canada, so I really wanted to try them out. And I had to pick up some KD, which I'll be recording a short video comparing it to the American equivalent Kraft mac and cheese. I also got this buttered chicken flavor packet for mac and cheese, so I'll also be recording a short video taste test on that one as well. Have you guys ever seen any flavor packets for mac and cheese like this before? It was my first time seeing something like it, so I was pretty intrigued. The last item to note were these all-dressed crackers, and they were alright. They wouldn't be my first choice, but they also aren't my last. Then we were almost at our first overnight stop. It was so pretty seeing the sunset on the drive with the mountains and the water all around. But eventually we reached Revelstoke, which was a ski town where we just caught some Z's. Then the next morning, we were back on the road and headed to Banff. When we finally were in the vicinity of Banff, we just had to pull over to capture some of the insane mountains that we were driving past. It's honestly such a gorgeous place, and I highly recommend visiting even if you're not outdoorsy, because you can totally just drive around and honestly just look at the mountains. It just still blows my mind looking at this footage. As we kept driving, we passed 2 bears and a frolicking moose, and that was just totally unreal. I also got some pretty cool pics of one of the bears, which I will share on my Instagram soon, but don't worry, they were taken from the comfort of our car. For now, here's a little gif I put on my Instagram story of one of the bears that we saw. Then we made it to our campsite where we had some wraps for lunch, which we filled with mustard, some chicken, cheese, and we had some carrots on the side. Okay, we're at our campsite and we've been having lunch. I had a wrap with some chicken and some mustard and carrots. It was delicious. But now I am trying the Canadian delicacy, which are ketchup chips. I'm very excited to try these. My friend Claire, who I'm with, found them at the store and was like, these are a must for this trip. Oh my god, they're so vibrant. Whoa, these look like flaming hot Cheetos, but like chip. Isn't this insane? Okay, I'm going in. Okay, hear me out. This tastes like you were at a barbecue and you put like ketchup on a burger or hot dog or whatever you're eating, and the ketchup accidentally got on the chips that were on your plate. I would say that is the exact taste. Like, it's not all there, you're not sure if you like it, but you're going to finish it anyways. So let me know if you've tried ketchup chips, if you like them, or if you've been to Canada. I'm gonna finish this and go on a hike. As we finished up lunch, we had a little visitor stroll onto our campsite. Yes, that is bear number 3 of the day. We saw this bear not more than 20 minutes after buying some precautionary bear spray, which is basically just a strong pepper spray that you could use in the event of a bear attack, which is supposedly unlikely. And to note, this bear was in fact a grizzly bear, unlike the other 2 that were black bears. So there was some minor concern. So we quickly hid our food, had our car ready if we needed to jump in it for safety, and then proceeded to just watch this awesome animal just chomp on some grass. We had some laughs about how many bears we had seen, and how when we bought the bear spray, the shopkeeper said she had worked there for 30 years and had never known anyone who needed to use it. But in the end, the park rangers were on their way, and before they pulled in, the bear moseyed on out of the campsite. Bears really can't see that well, so in reality, this one probably didn't even know that we were there, but we also had to be cautious just in case the bear smelled our just consumed lunch, and we didn't want it to follow its nose towards us. But I would say this experience was definitely one for the books. Then it was time to hike. We stayed in Johnson Canyon, so we were actually able to just walk over to this hike once the bear was gone, obviously. This was a pretty short hike that you followed to the upper and lower falls, and you could even keep going if you wanted to. It's a good beginner hike or one to do with a family, especially because you can just go to the lower falls if you don't want to hike for that long. It was also pretty paved, so it was a little less adventurous, but still filled with some great views. After we finished the hike, we spotted a lot of people with ice cream cones, so we followed our noses and got some ice cream after the hike. Obviously, I got maple walnut, and it was delectable. The perfect treat after a nice hike. Then we walked back to our campsite to relax and cook up dinner. On this night, we made a variation of something that my friend likes to make when she camps. We took a bunch of veggies and some store-bought sauce and covered it all in foil to put over the fire. We did the same type of thing to make nachos as well. And honestly, it was all really good. I don't have much experience with cooking while camping, but it was a lot of fun to build a fire and cook over it. If you have ever been camping before, or if you've cooked over a fire, do you have a go-to meal that you like to make? I'm curious. I definitely want to camp more and cook while camping more, so this, I would say, is just the beginning. Now the next day, it was time for some more hiking. But first, I ate a peanut butter and banana roll-up for some fuel, and I mean, even the parking lot had a great view, so I guess you could say I had breakfast with the view, but the mountains were just unreal through this whole trip. We headed to our first hike after breakfast, which was Fairview Lookout. It was about 1.5 miles, and all trails considered it moderately challenging. In some parts, it was a bit steep, but I think the real challenge was that it was a bit snowy, a little muddy, and kind of icy. I also did a little mudslide on this one, but it was nothing I couldn't laugh off. But since it was a shorter hike, the conditions really weren't too bad to deal with, and as you can see, the view was worth it. So we just hiked up to the Fairview Lookout over Lake Louise. Check out this view. Then we went down to the base of Lake Louise, which is the lake that we saw at the top of the Fairview Lookout. We just admired how beautiful and radiant the view was before we continued on to our next hike. Our Our next hike was to the Lake Agnes Tea House, which was probably one of my favorite hikes that I have ever done. There are mountain and lake views the whole way up. It's a 4.6-mile hike that All Trail says is also moderately challenging. The hike didn't have too many snowy paths until you were closer, and then it would have been advisable to have spikes or really good traction on your hiking boots. But along the hike, we were able to stop at Mirror Lake, which was just stunning. And after admiring this view, we finally made it to the tea house. Now, why is this hike named after a tea house? Well, it's because there is actually a tea house at the top with really good food and tea. The workers live at the top of the mountain and they hike up and down for their shift rotations, which is just so cool. I had a barley soup, a mountain bar, and to no one's surprise, a maple tea. It was all such a great pick-me-up after our hike, especially the mountain bar, which they claim is a cookie and a granola bar mixed, and frankly, I need the recipe stat. After we were satisfied and well rested, we headed down the mountain to have lunch. Lunch was basically the same as yesterday, except instead I put my carrots in my wrap, which at the time felt very inventive, but it was really just a good way to eat a lot of veggies, or just a good way to make a ginormous wrap. After lunch, we headed over to Lake Moran. This was just the icing to the cake of a perfect day. I mean, this view literally looks like a green screen. Now, after questioning if I was in a simulation, we headed back to camp for the night. For dinner, we made ramen, the rest of our veggies, and I stuffed a banana with some marshmallows, chocolate, and peanut butter, tossed it in the fire wrapped in foil, and had a tasty dessert that I also topped with goldfish chocolate graham crackers. Dinner was amazing, and it was another great night of being able to cook over a fire and just relax, but not relax under the stars because it stays light so late here. I was hoping to test out some night photography, and I was pleasantly surprised when at midnight it was still pretty bright out and there were no stars to be found. So that was a fun little anecdote of this last night in Banff, because just like that, it was time to leave our campsite and head on to our next destination. Before we left Canada, we decided to stop in Calgary for some food, but I filmed a whole food tour on that stop, and these are just some of the highlights, so stay tuned for that soon. After Calgary, we headed to Glacier National Park in Montana. At this point, we weren't sure if the weather was going to be on our side for the rest of the trip, but when it rains, sometimes there's a rainbow, and we saw an epic rainbow on our drive through Glacier National Park. The drive to where we were staying for the night was just as scenic as the whole drive through Canada. Now, after our first night in Montana, we quickly realized that we should probably cancel our camping plans and switch to sleeping indoors. The weather wasn't promising, so we just pivoted our plans and made the most of our trip, which included no longer cooking over a fire, but instead eating around town. I think it was a solid trade-off because our first Airbnb actually provided a bunch of recommendations around town, and it came really in handy. Our first stop was Witch House, which was quite the find. We saved most of our lunch to eat in the park, but our mushroom soup we decided to have before heading out, and I'm seriously still thinking about this soup. It had pickled potatoes and a spring herb oil in it. It was packed with so much flavor, and it made me question why all other mushroom soups aren't this good. Then it was time to head into Glacier National Park. Most of the hikes were rained out, so we got tickets to a scenic drive, which was called Going to the Sun Road. Most of the road was open, but because of the weather concerns, you could only go so far. But before we drove further into the park, we stopped to get our national park passports stamped at the visitor center. If you don't know what this is, it's basically just a way to track the national parks in America that you've been to. At visitor centers and national parks, there are stamps with a date, and you can mark it in your book to commemorate your trip, and they usually have stickers that you can also purchase to put in your book if you'd like. The Visitor Center is also where you can purchase these books if you're interested, and they're just a fun way to learn about all of the national parks and keep track of your travels. My friend wanted to dig into some of her lunch, and it was just so beautiful not to capture. She had a smoked chicken sandwich, and she said it was amazing. After that, we were able to go on a little bit of a stroll through an area that was still accessible. After our stroll, we headed over to Lake McDonald to eat the rest of our lunch by the water. I had a crispy celery root sandwich that was topped with whipped farmer's cheese, candied lemon, pickled onion, parsley, tarragon, lemon mayo, and it was all on a fresh baked bun that was made at Witch House. I mean, come on. It was insane. First question though, why have I not utilized celery root more? Second question, should I try to fly to Montana to have this again? But don't worry, I also got one of their cardamom and rhubarb corn cakes as well as their lemon poppy seed whoopie pie, and just wow. My taste buds were very excited by this meal that complemented an incredible view. That's good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I figured it'd be lemon poppy seed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I believe lavender.
I saw some on top.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. After that, we left the park, and our next activity was dinner, and we went for Mexican food, and it did not disappoint. I had nopales tacos with chips and 2 types of salsa that were so good. If you don't know what nopales are, they're cactus. It was really filling and flavorful, and I was just impressed considering we didn't even expect to be eating in town as much as we did on this leg of the trip. So this restaurant definitely surprised me, and I would totally go back here if I was near Glacier National Park again. For our last day in Montana, we decided to check out Montana Coffee Roasters for breakfast, and it was packed. It was clearly the place to be. I had their breakfast wrap with salsa and a peaches and cream scone. Just wow. Both of them were amazing. The breakfast wrap was fresh and the salsa complemented it so well. My friend had their egg scramble with potatoes and a muffin, and she enjoyed it just as much. I also had a black coffee, and it was bold and exactly what I wanted. After breakfast, we decided to go all around some local towns. We went through Whitefish and Columbia Falls, and both places had so many nice antique shops and specialty goods stores as well as boutiques. But we couldn't leave without lunch, so we stopped at our tried and true Witch House. This time, I decided to try some other items on the menu so that way I could maximize my experience. This time I had their asparagus hoagie, but apparently that wasn't enough asparagus for me because I also had their asparagus salad on the side. Both of them were, as expected, amazing. The hoagie was a little bit hard to eat, but even still, it stands strong next to a lot of vegetarian sandwiches that I've had. Everything that I had from Witch House was interesting and inventive, and I really appreciated that about their menu. Also, my friend got their mushroom soup again, just to affirm our collective emotion towards the soup. Also, I appreciated that both of their vegetarian sandwiches can be made vegan, and they even had a kids menu. If it wasn't apparent, if you're near Glacier National Park, it's definitely worth stopping at Witch House. And then we were off. We were headed back west towards Seattle, but first we decided to spend the night in Spokane, which is the second largest city in Washington. The city itself wasn't one that I would go out of my way to visit, but we did get some pretty good pho for dinner. I had shrimp and vegetables with a chicken broth, and it was warm and comforting after all of our travels. I also had a soy milk that was perfectly sweet, and it was a nice contrast to the soup. The next morning, we were on our way back to Seattle. It was so interesting to see how the terrain had changed, and the drive was a lot more deserty, but it was still beautiful the whole way. And eventually, when we made it back, we were pretty hungry. So we went out to get Ethiopian food. We both started with a lentil sambusa, and then for our meals, my friend had their vegetarian platter, and I had pho, which I have never had at an Ethiopian restaurant before. I think I've had it at a Lebanese restaurant, but the preparation was a little different, so it was cool to see how they have the same dish in different cultures, but they're prepared differently. I also thought it was interesting because it came with 2 rolls, and typically when I go to Ethiopian restaurants, I usually like to order dishes that have their injera, which is the spongy bread that you can see with my friend's dish. It's really good, so if you do ever go to an Ethiopian restaurant, I highly recommend getting something that has their injera. But it was cool to try something new in a cuisine that I really like, and I definitely would go back here. Still had a little bit of time before I flew home, so we decided to go on a hike outside of Seattle. The hike was along the Touloupis Lake Trail, and it was 3.5 miles, and all trails said it was moderately challenging. It was nice to be back on the trail since we weren't really able to do much of any hiking in Montana, but after we finished our hike, on our way back to Seattle, we stopped at the Snoqualmie Falls, which were pretty cool. Then it was time for lunch. We picked up Valhalla sandwiches on our way home, and I got sweet potato tots with their Buddha call sandwich that had more sweet potato, mushrooms, cheese, and all the fixings. It was delicious, and it just hit the spot after a nice hike. And then we rounded our day off at an amazing ice cream place, Frankie and Joe's. It's all plant-based, and this is their seasonal flavor mint chip, and it is in a waffle cone that's gluten-free because it's made with oat and maple and flax and vanilla, and it's so good. Currently dreaming of it, and I wish I had some right now. Okay, I'm back in Seattle after my road trip through the Pacific Northwest in Canada, and I head to New York tomorrow, which is kind of crazy. It's been a long week and a half, and I've had so much fun, but doesn't mean that I don't have time for a little Seattle food tour, so watch out for that video soon. And if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up so that way we'll keep on growing, and I will be sure to catch you next time. Bye!